Sorry. Okay, we're recording now.
Okay. So when he screams when he doesn't get what he wants, and some situations that are frustrating to him are when he wants to watch cartoons just at whatever point of day, and we have specific times of day for cartoons. When he wants to go somewhere specific and we can't go there. When he doesn't want to take a bath. When he has a hard time building with Legos. When he's not understood by other family members. When his brother doesn't want to give him the toy that he wants, when he wants to have a snack in the car and I don't have one. So those are some situations that cause him to start screaming. And he will scream and then start crying, but the screaming is very loud and piercing and goes on for some time. Not extremely long time, but he does stop eventually, but sometimes it can go on for a long time, which this is a conflict because hearing him scream is physically stressful for me because simply the noise level and my body just is overloaded. It's a sensory overload for me to hear him screaming so loud. It makes me feel frustrated and angry when he doesn't respond to my attempts to explain, and calm him down. It makes me worry that it's going to become a learned behavior, a habit, that the more it continues to happen, the more those neural pathways are strengthened for future behaviors. It makes me feel sad that his emotional reactions are disproportionate to the triggering situation. And of course, he is 3 years old, but I feel, and I understand, my problem is not that he's having an emotional reaction. It's just the level of emotional reaction to something very little that happens.
Yeah.
That he doesn't respond to talking, or I try to validate his feelings. I try to explain. He doesn't respond to that. So it's so it's just it's confusing, not confusing. It's hard for me to understand that just he gets so into this that he responds to hugs. I mean, he responds to hugs eventually, but it also makes it difficult for my parents to watch the two of my boys together because inevitably they play together and a screaming fit will happen. And even though my parents, they're very involved with the kids and they have a great relationship and they love spending time together, it gets them very frustrated because they also have a difficult time understanding and knowing how to react to these situations. So that's the conflict.
Beautiful. Okay, so what we're gonna do, Magda, is we're gonna put a pin on that because there was so much in there and that was awesome because we're gonna loop this back in. Okay, so this is parent-child. Okay, so we're in parent-child and we've got a little bit of sibling conflict in there. Okay, so I had some requests for different contexts. Does anyone, and I loved all of it. There's so much richness in there, Magda, and I'm going to bring it in when we're kind of going over the essence-based concept, because just to set an intention and to make clear what the goal is for these meetings is for us to learn more about nature's perspective, or this quantum, it's called quantum mechanics, this way of processing what happens and then what the internal and external interaction is. We're actually learning more about this lens through our lives, through specific experiences. So where I'm teaching these essence-based concepts, essentially, this is not a how-to class. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who have worked with me as a teacher or coach, I'm not a how-to girl. I used to be. But I found that the how-to is so circumstantially specific often, and it's external. It's like a top-down way of making a shift. So it has its place, but I found that when we do this through an inner place, when we actually adjust the way we see things, so much of the conflict dissolves on its own, and then we actually have a clear path to resolution. So we're going to be going from this internal place to deepen your understanding, Magda, of syntropy and what it has to say, what nature has to say about conflict, so that it's just going to come to you. This is going to be your own path. You're still going to navigate it, but we're all going to process this and learn from you, because I don't know about you guys. What is Magda alone here with any of the things she mentioned? Raise your hand if you haven't had on some level Magda's experience. Okay, all of us have been there with you, Magda. Okay, does anybody have like a different kind of context? Just so we have more examples to like add juice to our argument. I mean, our exploration. Anybody have one like with a stranger? So we talked about parent-child, sibling to sibling, anyone with like a personal experience. Okay, awesome. Jillian, go for it.
So I had to give a deposition, which I've never had to do before, last Friday, and it was really nerve-wracking. And I'm a pretty laid back person, but the lawyer who was giving the deposition was like the rudest human being I've ever met, and just trying to like make me feel so small the whole time. And it didn't work, don't worry. But it was super stressful, and I felt myself like old feelings coming back up where like I really wanted to like defend myself. And I felt like if he could just know like how wrong he is about me, right? Things like that. So I had to like really step back and take a couple breaths in the middle of the deposition. And then at the end of it, he wrote me this really snarky, nasty email, which was completely uncalled for and unwarranted and probably not legal, because whatever. And it took everything I had in me not to write. Like, I'm a good writer. Don't mess with me via email. It took everything I had, and I had to rewrite the email probably like 15 times before I hit send, and it was like presentable. But yeah, I don't come up against conflict like that very often. So it's like, it took a lot to just reel myself back in, for sure.
So awesome. Okay, so we have like a court related one. I love it. So awesome. That's a different context. Anybody else have like a different kind of context? Because we don't need too many, but like anyone who wants to share. This is a share space. Okay, I see you, Marcella. All right, let's see. Hang on. Ask to unmute. Got it?
All right. So mine would be just a recent one where between Justin and I, we previously had a different vision for Ayana. Now I only have 8% left on my phone, and then he's inside the restaurant, and I need to get his car keys so I could go in the car. But so we had a situation where we were at a potluck, and it was brought to Justin's attention that there is another option for Ayana to go to a different type of school, and she was in a conventional school, or Timber Trace Elementary. And then it was brought to his awareness that there's another type of school that she could be going to that would be more, I guess, synergistic to the alignment of what Justin and I have talked about her doing. But it happened so fast and overnight that it was shocking and like unstabling, but only for me, but not for Ayana and Justin. So it took like around 2 to 3 days for me to like take this all in, and then I didn't just accept it. I had some help along the way, but I also noticed a big shift and change in Ayana, which made this transition even more like simple and made it feel like very safe. So that would be my example of where we had different, I guess, opinions in regards to what we envisioned for our daughter. But then at the same time, it's been a really beautiful experience to see the evolvement of how it's become.
Amazing. I wonder what program you're speaking of.
And that'd be S to S.
I love it. I love it. Okay, awesome. So this is almost like an inner conflict, right? So it's like this outer, but like you were tending to the inner conflict. Okay, awesome. All right, so we have some good food for thought. Anybody else want to share so I don't leave anybody out who wants to express something? Sarah. Okay, great.
I have a few situations. I'm trying to choose which one. I guess I'll bring up the one with a friend. So I've had this friend since high school, and she's not married. She works. We have very different lifestyles, and she will often call me every few months with needing me to hear her vent negatively about how negatively her life is going. So I recently got a call from her last night about how she lost her job again, and she needed to talk to me. And so I did text her back within a few hours and just let her know that just like some encouraging things in like a Syntropy type of lens. And she said it was very hurtful and it wasn't what she needed to hear right now, and that she loves me and she's looking forward to talking with me. So I had to think of a way to respond where I wasn't going to hold space for her to vent negatively, because I can't do that right now and I'm not going to do that. So I wrote all this up. I'm sitting with it. I'm not sending it yet, but that's the conflict we have right now, where I need to like honor my space and my time and my energy, and how to tell her that in like a loving way.
Awesome. Awesome. So good. Okay. All right. Got it. So that's a little bit of a different category too, because now we're really talking about similar to Marcella, because this is going to be a you processing. But yeah, you're being met with this resistance and this difference of perspective and invitation to advise someone not receiving that well. I love it. Okay. Awesome. Anybody else have one? Okay. Awesome. Matthew, let's hear it.
I got a simple, quick one. So driving on I-95, the express lane, going a pretty decent amount, of speed. And this car gets out from behind me, goes around me, gets in front of me, and then slows down. That was it. That's the conflict.
Yes. Oh my God. Gary and I were just like exploring all these different conflicts. And like, that was one that he mentioned. Yeah. I love it. Okay. Awesome. Shannon, you got one?
Yes, Martina and I were just speaking, and hi, we in the dark because I'm nursing the baby to sleep, so that's why the camera's off. Our conflict is that we're just not used to having this many kids, and so we have 3 kids, and they're 7, 4, and 1, and the 7-year-old is like the wildest boy, and my 1-year-old's a little calm girl, and we just feel like we're constantly unable to manage it all with the amount of time that we have, and we constantly feel stretched and like pulled apart when our family is such a tight knit unit, but then like all 5 of us will want to run in 5 different directions and it pulls everybody. When one person pulls too far, it pulls everybody. So we're just struggling because we actually had infertility for 10 years and we got very comfortable with being just the 2 of us. And then you blink and we have 3 kids. And so it's an amazing miracle, but that's our conflict at the moment.
The pulling forces. Awesome. Yeah, that was such a good one. Okay. We have really good angles. I'm so excited. So we're going to loop these in. All right. So you guys ready? So we're going to just dive in. Now, this is my short recap. We're going to sit here and we're going to listen to a song. I was trying to think of the quickest way that I could reintroduce Syntropy or Entropy for those who weren't here last time, because I had trouble with the recording. I'm going to re-record it. So there's a little bit of like a 101 for those who want to dive deeper into Syntropy. But by the time we do these classes, we're going to constantly, talk about the lens. So you guys will come to know it. But I want everyone to just do me a favor and just listen to this song. It's kind of a silly song. And if you can't hear it, somebody give me a heads up in the chat. But this is the song my kids introduced me to, and it represents the voices of Syntropy and Entropy. Not every detail and every word spoken, but I feel like it's a good introduction. So see if you've heard this song before. All right, here we go. You guys hear it?
It's such a beautiful day. The sun's shining in a beautiful way. I'm gonna take a shower, brush my teeth, and life is ultimately meaningless. Being distorted by all into my face.
Okay.
Thank you, honey.
Exploitation. Old eagles on gold. Anytime you could get it when it's refreshing.
All right, I'm going to pause. I feel like you guys are having difficulty hearing it. I know people do this where they play Spotify in their Zoom. I have the lyrics.
There's Miss Lauren.
Yeah. Could you guys hear it at all? Could anybody hear it?
Hear it, but it's glitchy.
It's super glitchy. Okay.
All
right.
It's not what you hear.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'll send you guys the song and you can play it. But essentially, so let me actually, I'm going to switch into sharing my screen. I will find out about how to do that by next time.
I think, Marissa, I think if you hit share screen, there's like a checkbox at the bottom that says share screen audio. And then if you share your screen and play it, we could probably hear.
Thank you, Shannon. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Okay, let's try this again then. I can still put the lyrics in the chat. There are a lot of them. All right, here comes a really big, oh, this message is too long. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to listen to it. We're going to try it again. All right. If it doesn't work, it won't work. Well, let's try it one more time.
You're not sharing the screen.
It's such a beautiful day. The sun's shining in a beautiful day.
Oh, I have to share sound. Hang on. Hang on. Sorry. Making me enter my password just to do this. Okay. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
There you go.
Is it working now? I'm sharing.
You're sharing the screen now.
Okay. All right. One more time. We're going to try.
Gonna take a shower, brush my teeth. It's such a beautiful day. The sun's shining in a beautiful day. Gonna take a shower, brush my teeth. Life is ultimately meaningless. Top down, hands down, favorite song and nod to the and it's being distributed by your part of the nation. But so fast. It's in my face. 98% of what you learn for weight to get can't think of a better way to spend my time.
Can you guys hear it or no? Are we in no? No. Okay. All right. You can't hear it. Never mind. It was a good thought, but we don't need to do that. Okay. Sorry about that. I couldn't figure out where to even see the chat. So I need a Zoom lesson from Shannon. All right. We're going to go right into the exploration. So this is going to be brief and we're literally going to talk about the situations that you guys mentioned because there's so much awesome, so many great details that will be helpful in there. All right, so here we go. So don't use the mouse. Okay. I have my Zoom coach right here. Okay. All right, you guys. So we're exploring life through the lens of Syntropy, and tonight we're doing, the idea is, I would imagine all of you guys sign up for Soul to Soil for an experience. And what I haven't been able to fully share is that my intention is so much more. I watch these kids and I have these experiences with your amazing children. And we discuss these concepts that are directly from our observations in nature, and we're having all these beautiful discoveries, but they're your children, right? You are their greatest influence. I am my children's greatest influence. So it really didn't feel fully complete to do this without you guys. So that's really my intention here, is to talk about this. And conflict was one of the most helpful areas because, you can imagine we have kids of all different ages and they get into conflicts a lot. So I don't know. All right. So real quick, Syntropy. Life and nature have a quantum mechanical operating system and it's called Syntropy. So if we were to really just drill down, what is this thing? It's basically a way that things go based on an intentional, like an operating system. Like there's a design to life. And if we observe objectively, then we can get clues from it about how we're living. Humans, we have minds and we have all of this amazing creative potential, but a lot of times there's interference in our circumstances, and our circumstances are actually showing us what is interfering from our way of relating to like what's happening to us and who we are and what environments we're in. And conflict is like the interaction between forces. So I wanted to just ask you guys, sorry, this is really such a humorous exploration or evidence of Marissa's deficiencies with computers. Okay. So first, let's just define conflict. And I wanted to actually share with you a really cool definition that came up. So I don't know how much you guys know this, but when we explore words at Soul to Soil, I do all of this really fun research. So I Google it. I look at like the colloquial definitions of things. I look at kind of some quantum scientific definitions. I'll look at word roots, like etymology. So when I teach them vocabulary, and then I ask them what they think about it, like what is their sense of the word. So conflict came up last year during Fire segment was all about story. And it turns out that conflict is one of the 5 elements of a story. So where we talk about 5 elements of life at Soul to Soil, right? We have ether, water, air, earth, fire. In a story, you have plot, setting, characters, conflict, and then we have resolution. So when we were defining this, essentially the definition that came up was these pulling forces. So there's like an interaction between pulling forces that happens. And if we're really, if we really widen our lens, and I don't know how much you guys have explored this, I talk about it a little, that most of what we encounter in our lives are told through our mind's story or someone else's mind story. And, when you really look into, if we were to get ticky-tacky with, what thoughts belong to us that we self-generate and what thoughts are programmed in by our earliest influences, and then our, basically ways of relating that we built around what's happened to us. Most of our thoughts are actually programmed. So we're not the creators of most of our thoughts. So there tends to be these layers of filters, like beliefs about, how things should go, how I should show up, how I should behave, how others should behave, what I should be experiencing. And if you notice, the word should is in a lot of this, but even what's possible, right? We're taught what's possible. This is one of the reasons I started Soul to Soil, was to expand the potentialities of what is possible in a student, a young mind growing up. I found there are a lot of limitations in the conventional model, and in my own experience, I didn't pursue things because I just thought, well, this is what's available to me, and it was smaller than what I realized actually was available. So conflict to me is this interaction between opposing forces. Now, all of the conflicts that you guys mentioned involved some stress, like some internal stress. But conflict doesn't necessarily have to go that way. Now, it's an essential element of a story as we collectively define story. So I don't know how many of you guys know a really great story to tell that doesn't involve some kind of pulling forces, some kind of interaction of like differing perspectives. Gary and I had this really big discussion about whether I felt like conflict was this interaction between opposing forces. He felt they just had to be different. Feel free, you guys, to like add into the chat whether you think that they need to be on some level opposites. But life is actually, it would be pretty boring if there weren't some kind of pulling forces. There wasn't some kind of dynamic, opposite force interaction that was happening. So, when we talk about conflict in our lives, that's at the essence of it. It's just this interaction between, different expressions or opposing expressions as I see it. Then we look to nature, and Gary and I again had this really deep dive conversation into this. And I am curious, please just take a minute. Did anybody contemplate this idea of nature and like conflict in nature? Does anybody have any examples? Feel free to unmute or just pop into the chat. Could anyone think of conflict in nature?
This is Shannon. I was just gonna say that we have like a lot of garden in our house, like in our property, and we have a lot of caterpillars that cocoon, and like, they have, when they build that cocoon, they have to push out, and we have flowers that bloom every day and drop every day, and so there's a lot of force, I think, for the beauty to have to come out, for the evolution of caterpillar to butterfly, and of like the bud to the flower. It's effortless for the flower to fall off, but like you can see it struggling. Like if you watch, it'll shake a little bit. So it's maybe just like the conflict to evolution.
Yes. And then those would be, there's some kind of resistance there. There's a resistance that then gives rise to this like next creative metamorphosis. Yeah, that's such a good one. let's see, what did anybody else? Natural selection, food chain storms, right? We were thinking of hurricanes, hurricanes as conflict. So one of the things that came to me was like nature documentaries. If you watch, there are some beautiful documentaries. I love the National Geographic ones on just bears or elephants, whatever I love to watch animal documentaries. But it's so interesting because you hear the story that's told. Imagine if one of those were just the beautiful pictures and there was no conflict. Every single one of them is set up like a movie where the narrator creates some kind of a situation between predator and prey, or, mama bear trying to get her cubs safely across the river so that the alligators don't eat them. Like there are these scenarios, but the experience in the animal kingdom, or even, the insect kingdom, that Shannon's mentioning, or even like, flower, the plant kingdom, is it the same as what we're talking about when I can't rationalize with my 3-year-old, or my friend she asks for my advice and then feels completely upset when I give her my honest opinion through this new perspective I've taken on, or, I show up in court and try to do my best and get like attacked after the fact. All of these different things, these are like human conflicts versus these natural conflicts. So how do we relate them, and how do we actually learn through how the natural ones go? Because, there is the beauty of this butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, right? This caterpillar going into this resistive cocoon and then actually coming out on the other side. And how I'm sure you guys have heard that that parable of the man who cut the bottom of the chrysalis, and then the butterfly, because the butterfly didn't have a chance to like struggle out of the chrysalis itself, it fell to the floor and died. It never built the strength. So there is this purpose for conflict and resistance. So, but what is that purpose, right? And then this idea of resolution. So I think that what I wanted to just at least put out there is just the contemplation of like, what do we need in order to resolve some of these conflicts? What do we need, Matthew, to resolve this conflicting feeling when a guy just clearly, purposely cuts in front of me and just to like piss me off goes slowly, and now I'm dealing with this? Or, what is the resolution that we're looking for, right? Even Shannon with this monumentally different existence of managing 3 children, when for such a long time it was just you and your husband. What is the resolution that we're looking for, and is there like a process? What are the elements of that? All right, so I promise, Gary, I'm pressing the right key and it's not working, so I'm just going to do this with the mouse. All right, so what are the aspects of a conflict that influence the outcome? I want to point your attention here because I just had an experience the other day that some of you may have heard about at the beach, and I'm happy to tell that story. I've told it so many times I didn't know if I should even bring it here, because I'm pretty sure I've talked to each and every one of you about it at some point. But there was something that happened at the beach on Thursday, and when I really contemplated how the outcome, because I had a peaceful outcome. And essentially what happened was there was absolutely a conflict. There were definitely opposing forces, but the way that it went and the way that it ended had everything to do with these 2 things. So there's the consciousness, which is really a lot of what we're talking about with Syntropy. When I define consciousness, I use that word a lot at Soul to Soil. So we've done it every year so far, and each year the definition that I come up with, is a little different. But this year it was like the pattern of thoughts that direct how we act, and then even what happens. And my goal is to really connect this idea of that how we think of things really directs how they turn out. It's just very difficult to see that when we're in the resistance of the moment and we're experiencing all of the energy that's there when the conflict arises, because some conflicts are menial, right? But then some of them really, really fire us up, right? Somebody who could be in the car and have a guy cut him off and go slowly and not have a reaction at all. And one day, Matthew, I'll tell you a really scary story I had about that exact scenario in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. But the way of relating, somebody else might be like, all right, you know what? Have at it, guy. Like, it's just, there's no trigger. There's no emotional energy that's worked up. So a lot of what influences the trigger has to do with the consciousness. So immediately what I want to point you guys to today is when a conflict comes up, in our human experience, that in many respects is an opportunity, because when we're really, really triggered, we even have a consciousness about how we should react and what we should say. And there are all of these opinions and beliefs and programs that are running that then they flare a conflict even more. And they really, they don't all of them come into view, but they all have influence. So when we start to reset our consciousness and we choose syntropy over entropy, and entropy, for those of you guys who weren't at the last call, it was entropy is the opposite of syntropy. It is actually how our whole society is wired. You guys have probably heard that word before when physicists talk about the laws of thermodynamics, that like entropy is actually considered to be a law in classical material physics, Newtonian physics. So entropy is this belief in randomness, and it tends to be kind of like a party pooping way of looking at life. It's that scarcity of resources, there's not going to be enough for everyone, there's going to be too many people. Entropy believes that no matter how hard I try, like maybe I'll get lucky, maybe I won't. It's not a creator consciousness. It's very much leads to either a predator or a victim consciousness. Competition in like the icky sense, not like a really fun sports team kind of competition where we all boost each other up and perform our best kind of competition. A competition where there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser, or like war would be such a perfect example of entropic competition. And because it's my consciousness, because it's the set of thoughts, ideas, and beliefs that affect how I even approach a conflict, what I bring to the conflict, it affects how that conflict can resolve, what outcome happens. So before we even tackle any of like what to say, this working on the level of lens is so efficient, because as you attune it, then when you have these triggered experiences where you're really flared up in the moment and your, reasoning faculties have perhaps left the building, you at least you will have trained a different way of relating so that you don't have to attach ideas to the feelings, because we live in an electromagnetic universe, right? Or so we believe at the moment. And living in an electromagnetic universe, we're constantly interacting, or we always have forces interacting, and the medium through which they interact, which by the way is going to be the next segment, is ether. Ether is essentially void and space, like the stage for creation. Electromagnetic signals, like when I call you on my cell phone, air is not carrying those sound waves the way that like a voice is carried, right? That those are traveling through an electromagnetic field. That's how you're receiving. That's how you're receiving text messages. That's how you're receiving this Zoom. It's through this electromagnetic field. But if we look at electric energies and magnetic energies, you can think of emotions as the magnetism. And some of you guys have learned this from me before in some of the healing classes. There's the magnetism of emotions, right? And some of you guys who are in the coaching space know this too. And then electricity, right, which are the thoughts, they're the charges, they're the beliefs, the programs, right, the things that define the filter or the consciousness. When those interact, and I have all of those crowding my space when I'm emotionally triggered, that is the interaction that then builds whatever happens. So whatever happens in that space with that other being, or within yourself, or within the environment, in your car, on the road, any of that, it's the magnetism of emotion that's present, that is like now activated due to this like budding, these forces interacting. And then there's the magnetism of the thoughts, the beliefs, I'm so worried that if I allow, this kid to watch screens too much, he's going to be addicted, and it's just not good for him, and it's going to totally mess with his own electromagnetic field, and all of the beliefs, or it means that that just doesn't align for me as a mom. All of these awarenesses, or just that, you need to do what I say when I say it. That's just how it is. That's how it needs to be. That's the dynamic between parent and child, right? Whatever the ideas are, which by the way, none of them are wrong, right? All of them are characteristics of, are aspects of your consciousness. And the beauty of a conflict, and why that makes for such a great story, is because you get to see what happens at that interface, what happens at that interaction. And if you can learn how to become more of an observer, and stay in the creator space where I am seeing my consciousness. I am seeing aspects of my consciousness that are now flared and very present. Then you have an opportunity to separate those charges from the magnetism, let the magnetism move, which is just kind of like a great thing to do because it's energy, right? Energy loves to move, and stagnant energy is where all the not great stuff happens. And then you can choose, you can create. Electric charges are what we create with. Thoughts are how we create our lives. It's how we build our lives, you know? So, and you can let go of any that you notice are in the picture that just don't belong anymore, that you just don't even, it's not, they're not helping you, that like they make sense because they fit with that magnetism and they fit with everything that you have believed in your consciousness, but you can choose to let them go because you're seeing that at this interface, you're not in an experience that you really love. You're not really so happy that you were just happily driving home. And then all of a sudden now you want to like ram into the back of this car, right? That just cut you off and went slowly. So the consciousness, this is where we can enact major changes in the outcome in any conflict. Okay. This is at the essence of it. And syntropy is our chosen consciousness. So there are tenets of syntropy that are really beautiful that, sounds like Sarah was employing when she was delivering advice to her friend, but then can be triggering. So here's the next stage that Sarah encountered, and Jillian, right? After making the case. So there's controversy. And maybe I would love to invite Marguerite to speak about this if you're open to later. But I really started to become curious about controversy after taking a class that was recommended by Marguerite. And, I believe Lauren's taken it too. It's amazing. Well, I'll send information about it. It's called The Law for Mankind. And it's this really interesting practical perspective on what some of these concepts are that are relevant, that are active in controversy, in conflict, that don't help us at all. So controversy is basically like drama. It's like the story that's there when you're in the fight. Like Magda, when you're so keyed up and you're like, your nervous system has had it with the screaming and the tantrum and the opposing, and you're trying to get something done, and you've got, another kid and other things. When you're in that, and then you're met with the conflict, or more conflict, it's the surface story that's there is the controversy. And so what I called it's like an entanglement of beliefs that are present, and then that lead to an expression of resistance. So controversy is that resistance, because I don't know if you guys have heard that Carl Jung quote. I love it. What we resist persists. So when we resist in a conflict, even within ourselves, like we don't even allow ourselves to see what we really want to say. Because how many times does that happen with your kids where you're like, well, you know what? And you want to say the thing that is not necessarily the most appropriate or beneficial to say. So it's this drama that leads to an expression of resistance against. So controversy is resistance against. And when you're in a conflict, just because it is the interaction of maybe even opposite forces or pulling forces, doesn't mean it has to be against. It doesn't have to be a war, and it certainly doesn't have to be a competition. So this is where the power is. And but most of us are like, we have our eye on the prize. We're like, okay, how do I just get to work? You have your thing going on. Can you just put your shoes on, please? We have to leave. And then it's this big thing of, I have all the stories of how I have to get to work, and oh my God, if I'm late, I'm going to let this person down, and that's just not even an option. And then they are like, oh, shiny new thing that I'm paying attention to instead of my shoes that my mom asked me to put on 10 times. So you have that interaction of forces, right? And then you have the stories that go on, and most of us are so stuck in the controversy, or we're shaming ourselves. So we're bringing in shame consciousness, where I shouldn't feel this way, just breathe. He's just a child. Okay. And then it's just, we suppress and actually pressurize that magnetism to expand itself. We actually fuel that energy. All right. So the consciousness and the controversy. So, and while we're on this kind of perspective, we're talking about the consciousness, right? So I'm just going to really quickly give you guys a review of what Syntropy says in general. Let's just remind ourselves of this lens. So Syntropy says nothing is random, even chaos is organized, okay? Life moves towards abundance and harmony. Like that's the default. It's just automatically happening. We don't even have to try. I cooperate to co-create plenty for all. So there's this energy of cooperation, that I am not separate. I am not one. I am part of an ecosystem. So I perform a function and I work with everyone to co-create plenty for all. Nothing is just on my shoulders. It's not just my responsibility. So even within a family ecosystem, right? Think about how much is the energy of cooperation present in the consciousness of your household, right? So I co-create plenty for all, more life density. So life loves, in nature, life loves more kinds of life. If you let a forest really go, it's going to blend and create tons of biodiversity. And so more types and kinds of material life, and then ways of living, right? So diversity of perspective is actually what we're wired for, what this universe is wired for. But beliefs, right, keep us in opposition and in resistance to, different ways. The possibilities are endless. So we live in a universe of unlimited potentiality. And when conflicts are resolved, dreams come true. So it's almost like conflicts are these blocks or challenges that come into the picture that once resolved, because syntropy is not just everything's coming up roses and I'm just never I'm going to pretend like there's no problems ever. Like that's definitely not syntropy. In syntropy, unresolved conflict remains unresolved. But anything is possible. As I start to clear that stuff, then all these abundant possibilities are there. Entropy says the opposite. I am at the effect of a random universe. Resources are scarce. I have to compete or sacrifice to have enough. I must focus on risks so as not to lose, fail, or die, right? Here are the fears. Life has an end. What is best for most may not be best for all. So entropy is one of those, like, take one for the team, like sacrifice myself and live in service of it's okay for me to harm myself as long as it helps some. The dark unknown is to be feared and avoided. So this idea of ether and space, like the space through which information travels, like the internet right now, right? The wireless communication, just even our energies interacting, is this dark space. In the Bible, there's this description of God, I think it's in Ephesians, and it says that God was this dark chaos. So it's like the dark in many ways. Think about a womb and a baby, right? So like the darkness, we come out of the darkness into the light, right? So it is this creation space. But how many of us were afraid of the dark? How many of our kids are afraid of the dark? We have this relationship with dark that in itself is a conflict that's operating in a conflict, because you don't know what's happening. You don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of times that overrides your whole consciousness. And that conflict can't end well because you're totally in fear and maybe even in avoidance, which is going to be a resistive type of energy. And then this idea of you can never be too careful, right? Like anything can happen, any disaster can happen at any time. There's no creator space of like, I'm the creator of my life, not the controller. Control is entropic. Okay, so these were the battlegrounds that were requested that we go over, and you guys have basically covered all of them. I'm going to add a little in the environments and in our bodies, but this is something I really want to invite you guys to ask yourselves. Is conflict something to avoid? So whether we have like siblings over here fighting, we have parents fighting, and maybe the kids watching, right? Because sometimes we just stifle conflict. We're like, we'll talk about it later. We can't do this in front of the kids. And, there's a lot of justification for that, right? There's a lot of, we just talked about programming and influence. How many times have we felt like, oh, like this is when it's relevant. I'm flared. Here's the conflict right here. I need to tend to it, but I can't do it because the kids are awake. And then we wait, and maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. At Soul to Soil, our conflict resolution method we call peace talks. Peace talks are basically just a space for expression. It's a guided space for the forces of perspectives, or the perspectives at play, to express fully, and then basically see one another, and then allow time for the magnetism to flow through, and then to elect what parts of the story are not actually serving the ultimate outcome. which, you know, powerlessness or anger or any of those flared up magnetisms, there, you're not going to be, peace is not necessarily on the radar when kids are fighting and resolving, when the ow of you punched me is still there. And all they can think of is it's your fault. You punched me. You're the worst. You're a bully. All of those electrical, right, charges. And there's no resolution that's happening there, right? Even with an I'm sorry, like I'm sorry is not really a resolution. I started to like not even ask for it anymore in my house because I just feel like it's one of those, energetically, it doesn't always have this peaceful resolution that I really feel we're looking for, and that conflict offers. To me, the true definition of conflict from a syntropic lens is opportunity for more peace. And I say that now as I'm not in conflict in the current moment. So then we have, you know, parents and children, right? That's a huge one for me, at least. And then I had to add in the last one, which is just with our environments, with our bodies. How many times are we in conflict? Like we want to trust our bodies, but then if I have something called an infection or a really dangerous disease, there's some kind of a story at play, then I, a lot of times, will go and employ some kind of an attack on my body, because I'm not separate from my body. If I put something in that harms it, well, I mean, that's certainly going to create an effect. And I don't know if there's going to be a peaceful resolution there from that. So we can tell ourselves stories that it will lead to peaceful resolution. But how is that any different than if I come in and, you know, the siblings have a fight, and you basically just tell the one that got beat up on, just beat him back, you know, and then he ends up, you know, the one who was the initial aggressor now becomes the one who's the victim. And it's just this, you know, this basically play of brute force, you know. Well, it has its place in the story for you know, a level of this life experience. I'm not here to make anything wrong, but clearly you guys are here. So, you know, because I invited you, but also because we're trying to really link up with Syntropy, which basically says that's never necessary. You don't ever need violent, intentional battle of force counterforce to resolve a conflict. There's always some kind of a harmonious resolution, and that does not necessarily mean calm. So these are the contexts, and then we have this, you know, the environment in our bodies. So contemplating, is conflict something to avoid? And then really, I just want to read this quote. This Gary reminded me of, and it's an awesome one. This is part of a 16-page paper that if anyone wants to do a little bit of background and kind of like outside research on future discussions about germs, most of you guys know that I'm somebody who does not support the conflict stories about germs in our bodies, and there's ways that I dissolve that by shifting the consciousness and removing controversy. But this is a quote from Goethe. He said, "In the sciences, people come to regard as their own personal property that which they have learned and had passed on to them at the universities and academies." Okay, so now we're talking on more of like an intellectual level of like philosophy, the way we do things, the shoulds of society. So you could easily put in instead of universities and academies, authorities, elders, right? This is the experience of the child, right? People, we take on these beliefs as though they're our own, but they were implanted, they were introduced, they were passed on to us. If someone else comes along with new ideas that contradict the credo, so like the collective consciousness, and in fact, even threaten to overturn it, then all passions are raised against this threat and no method is left untried to suppress it. People resist it in every way possible. They resist the new way of thinking, pretending not to have heard about it, speaking disparagingly of it, as if it were not even worth the effort to look into the matter. Oh, you are ridiculous. What are you even saying? Like, let's just put it in the context of a sibling fight. That's so not true. That is totally not true. You're lying. How many times do you hear that, right? Even with adults, and even in the courtroom, Jillian, right? And so a new truth can have a long wait before finally being accepted. So what this tells me is that when we as a society are are so congested and crowded with beliefs about how things should go, what's right, what's wrong, what the rules are, what's legal, right? What's the kind thing to do and what's unkind. We have lots of these judgments, which is, by the way, next topic, judgment and guilt. There's always going to be a resistance, and it's uncomfortable to go beneath the surface story. So a lot of times we're just dealing in the surface story. We're experiencing our emotional flare up because of it. And then really not necessarily adjusting the consciousness. We're just trying to figure out what to do. We're trying to jump to the outcome. So I have this picture, this quote in front of a fire, and I just wanted to share with you guys something that reflects how I teach your children. And I'm going to offer it up to see if it helps you guys see what nature specifically has to say about this. So, as I said, in fire last year, we were talking about story. And we did talk about controversy, but we also were kind of looking at the science of fire and like how this even happens. How does this spark become this big flame, and what materials are needed? What are the qualities of the materials that help this fire start up best? And in general, when you're trying to make a fire, Matthew, I'm sure you can back me up on this. He's made epic fires I've seen before. So usually you need materials that are, very weakly bonded. So a dried up old piece of wood that doesn't have a whole lot of life or water or well bonded elements in it, that's going to light up really well. The more refined that substance is, the more it's been stripped of its wholeness, the quicker it goes up in flames. So if you think about even petroleum, which is like fossil fuel, that's oil, something that's extracted from the earth. So that is great for fueling flames. But if you go even further and you go to like refined oils, you go to like, propane, or, those of you who follow more like a whole fats diet, right? It's like a whole fat, a saturated, well bonded fat versus a, industrial seed oil that's just been made in a factory and it's stripped of all of its, living essence, its wholeness from the plant that it came from, the seed or wherever it came from. It's going to light up much quicker. Like the types of oils that McDonald's uses for its fries it could be great for our gas tanks, our car gas tanks. So what I learned from fire is that hydrocarbons they're hydrocarbons, right? Essentially mostly made up of hydrogen and carbon with very weak bonds. So the more something is stripped of its wholeness, the more it forgets that it's connected to everything, the more it loses its connections, the more quickly and highly reactive it's going to be. So at an interaction with a spark, so when it's reacting with oxygen or something, that it is a catalyst for a reaction. Even think about like acid and base. You have vinegar and you put some baking soda in it and right, it bubbles up. That interaction has to do with the nature of the substances interacting, right? And what their relationship is. So with a fuel like wood or propane or something, it actually has to do with how well it's bonded. Magda, you so beautifully said that what makes it better for your 3-year-old, for Milan, is a hug, right? It's that bond. It's that like the essence underneath the conflict. Now, I am not here for a how-to. Remember, there's plenty of people who speak about this, and I some of you guys know I'm not such a fan anymore of the coaching, the how-to, because there's this inside out. You have your own brilliant how. I promise you. You have like a how that's going to come through. It's like how the peace talks came out of Soul to Soil. I did not plan them. I did not think of them in advance. It literally came out of a need that revealed itself. And then this presence of this lens. I don't teach your children through the Marissa consciousness. Only the parts of the Marissa consciousness that are substantiated by syntropy in nature. And when a Marissa consciousness comes through, usually I'm making remedy or asking for resolution, because if it's something that reflects my unbonded sides, my reactive parts, the hydrocarbons that are really unstable within me, then I actually need to make remedy. I usually like to make amends there. And it's not that I do anything wrong or there isn't an admission of guilt per se. There's just anytime there's a flare up, it's great because I learn about myself and then instantly I address it and share with your children what happened, so that there's this deeper understanding of what is inside of the reaction. And this becomes difficult when we don't have space for it. There isn't always the space and time to have complete resolution. But when we take some of these conflicts and we really use them as exercises to see all of the angles of where we have like unbonded, electromagnetic connection points, and we reconnect with wholeness, we remember that who we are arguing with or what we are encountering is there as a teacher, and nothing else. There's no such thing as an enemy circumstance, person, place, and that is a very difficult thing to tend to. Let me just make sure this is my last slide so I can actually talk to you guys beyond the screen. I'm gonna maybe share that later. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. So we're gonna discuss, just because I don't want to go too long tonight. I know you guys have to go. Okay, so this idea of resolution and making space for resolution is at the crux of what I want to see how you guys are processing, because most of us, I hear this a lot. I don't feel seen. And most of us have seen this before, that like a lot of times our kids are reacting in a certain way, or they're acting in a certain way to get attention, right? So there's this like unseen theme that is going on as I see it and as I've experienced it. And to me, to be unseen is to be, there isn't such a thing as unseen when someone is fully expressed. So I asked this question of whether conflict is to be avoided, because when shame or guilt or judgment complicate the picture, then it's very easy to forget that this experience is actually here to help. Right? Like the dealing with these conflicts and dealing with how you feel about them, like it can happen over time. Like I think we're rushing sometimes for resolution and outcome in a moment without getting to see the opportunity that is there. Because if that scenario weren't there, you wouldn't get to see inside of the back of your head some of those thoughts that are running, some of those opinions. How about just some of the emotional energy that was stuffed down, has been stuck and hadn't had a chance to move. And you now have this sacred opportunity to just like breathe and let it out, and not immediately follow the path of any of those electrical charges that are part of your programming or way of relating with this particular conflict. So in this interaction, you're not necessarily meant to understand anyone but you. And that is kind of the trouble, right? With a 3-year-old, or even like an attorney, like when you're dealing with somebody who has a separate consciousness, who does not share your perspective or your view on life, what are you going to do? You're going to argue with them, and you think you're going to reach resolution in that moment when you're just trying to make them see you, instead of just fully expressing to yourself what you're actually going through. Like, what actually are you feeling about whatever it is in front of you? Right? Like, why are the stakes so high? What is the story behind this very obvious, there's a jerk driving in front of me trying to start something, or there's this attorney who, I just am honestly expressing in a deposition, and then I have to be like, I have to have an attack, when, well, that is kind of the job of lawyers. I'm a daughter of 2 lawyers, and they were not litigators. Well, my dad was, but you don't want to get into an argument with them, because it's not necessarily about peace. It's not actually, about really resolution. In at least in the way that Syntropy would have us resolve it. Because to me, resolution is like healing. Like, you remember, oh my gosh, this is what's actually going on. I am connected to this other human being, whether it's my kid that I'm so like beyond frustrated with, or a stranger, or a toxin in the things that are crossing the sky, when these planes go by, or in food. Whatever it is that I'm in conflict with is my teacher in that moment. And the biggest problem, and this is not something I have a solution for, the biggest problem in conflict is space. Where do we have the space? Where do we give ourselves the space and time to actually see what's there and what is wanting to be expressed in this conflict? So that then bonds can be made and it doesn't flare. Like the whole outcome changes. Your whole, like a wealth of other options that you couldn't possibly think of when you have all of these beliefs buzzing around you. The how doesn't even have an opportunity to come through, right? The highest outcome of that resolution is something we can decide in advance. Like this is going in the direction of peace or acceptance. Okay, either way. Sometimes peace is not within reach in a given scenario. That's kind of sometimes a tall order. So sometimes it's just acceptance. Sometimes it's just, it is space. So having an idea of just emotionally what the outcome is, not I need that person to see my side. I need to see I need them to see that they're being totally unreasonable and that I was just trying to help. And right. So what, like, but it's when you tell yourself how, you're not hearing yourself. What are you saying? What are the stories there? So can anybody share, like anyone who shared, anything come up for you as I'm painting this picture? Or is this like, well, because a lot of this stuff, it's not new, right? Most of you guys already know this stuff, right? But how hasn't it harmonized, or how can we support each other in bringing in this perspective of, oh, I'm the hydrocarbon, and so is that person. And when I make it about the thing that is lighting us up, I'm completely distracted from the fact that I have all these broken bonds and I have all these, I like to call them like bond breaking beliefs. And I'm not tending to those. Those are present right now and I'm able to see them. So while I'm freaked out and trying to just get rid of this thing in front of me, I'm missing the boat on seeing what's alive for me, and that what will, when I address it, what will have this not happening anymore, or will bring this to a completely different outcome. So what comes up? Anybody want to share?
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
The whole relationship to fire was just extraordinarily enlightening. For no pun intended. Okay, maybe pun intended. I don't know. But the idea of that these loose bonds are what ignite so quickly, and that the loose bonds come from the fact that we have unresolved things within us. We're not whole. And this, you can, but she's a little bit mischievous. Sorry, my dog wants to come in and create conflict. What comes to mind when you mentioned this whole Law for Mankind course, and one of the things that I really appreciated about that is that when there is conflict, or when there is a potential of conflict, the owning of how you feel, or if you're in a situation where you're actually scared, to just say, I'm really scared right now. Just to actually even say that to another person, or to say, I'm feeling very triggered. And I think that the idea of owning that is a huge step toward becoming whole. And then you see, oh, just the acknowledgement of that is one of the ways that you get through that, to release it. And I think that you're right, there's a lot of shame and guilt that's associated with those feelings. So we're not supposed to feel scared, or we're not supposed to feel this, or we're not supposed to feel that. And one of the things that comes up a lot for me is indignation. Yes. I feel really indignant about something, whether it's a conflict with me, or whether I observe a conflict with somebody else, or it's like, no, that's just not right. That sense of injustice or indignation. And that feeling that, well, I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't feel that way. It's not me. Or I shouldn't feel that way because it's getting me well. Well, instead of the shoulds, just saying, no, I do feel that way. Okay. So what's behind feeling that? And then once I can get behind why I'm feeling that way, why do I feel that way? Oh, maybe it's related to what happened to me in 5th grade, and even just recognizing that allows me to then release it and be able to see more of what the other person is feeling. And then I'm allowed to sort of either own my own part in the conflict, or at the very least feel compassion for what the other person is feeling. And that's at least one step closer to finding some kind of remedy or some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's just kind of what came up for me. And I don't know if that was at all helpful, but
it's so helpful. And I want to just bring back, so let's just real quickly bring back Magda's scenario, right? So Magda, you are in this really beautiful opportunity to see what comes up for you. I am intensely sound sensitive when these kids are flaring. I really would love to lean on the help of my parents, but I have 2 boys and my parents have this relationship with how they would like their grandkids to act. And well, they don't act that way. And then I'm stressed because now they're stressed and I can't really feel good about getting this help, right? I notice that, I feel like they shouldn't be watching this many cartoons, and that he's addicted. And I heard this thing on Instagram, or I read this article, or I know from my expertise as a psychologist, I know the negative impact of screens on, you have so many charges, electrical charges, right? And then name the feeling, right? So Marguerite mentioned, I notice that I feel fear. I feel worry, right? I feel, when you do the I feel, and then you notice the electrical charges, you are immediately bringing into your awareness like a separateness. Now they're not like merged and just like firing on all cylinders. They're a weapon together. Okay. They can be such a weapon together. And it influences what you say. And, the fuel is that magnetism, right? And then the things that you think and say are that. So this is why it's difficult to ask Marissa for healing answers, because I don't tell you, well, just, give this remedy or say this thing and it'll diffuse. There are those things, right? There are those beautiful, experts who share about the words to say and try to say this instead, or try to imagine this is what your child is thinking. That's lovely. That's not what we're talking about today. What I'm sharing is, how do you use this as an opportunity to know more about yourself, and through just seeing it, because it's really that simple. It's seeing it and going, do I choose to believe this? Do I choose that, my children, or was I told kids are meant to be seen, not heard? Or where was I, shamed? Where did I feel like indignant even, where it was just unfair? That, or maybe it is unfair. Are you in the car and you're sharing space, and maybe need to have a lovely conversation with your kids about, excuse me, we're sharing this space, and I would love it if we could all make an agreement to, right? When you know your story, that's the thing to express, because whether the child is, 3 or 33, or it's an adult, when we are fully expressed, someone can now see us. And I'm not saying you're never going to have a jerk who doesn't see you and who continues with the resistance anyway, right? But most of the time, when we are fully seen authentically, when the actual thing that's going on is seen and expressed, you become bonded and whole. You're not as reactive, and then they're not as reactive. We share energy. If there's one thing I believe is contagious, it's energy. And that's something that we share in those moments. And our greatest influence is our way of being. But I think sometimes in this mindfulness and spiritual development and personal growth, sometimes it's like we focus on the method, but like the emotional juice and the charges of some of these beliefs, they don't get fully seen and heard. So I did this for a very long time, where I bypassed a lot of that because I thought, it's bad. I can't fight in front of my kids. Even just look at that context, right? Should parents not fight in front of their children? Well, let's just take should out of it. How about ask yourself, how do I feel about that? How do I feel about my child seeing the authentic conflict that is just in my relationship right now, and that I'm doing the best that I can? And maybe as I walk this worthy path of showing up, of seeing what's there, of coming to know myself, of staying out of a blame place, staying out of war, that maybe my child will see this, that, wow, like you can fight and you can resolve and you can shift, and the energy that was there in the beginning, wow, it's really shifted. Like when we live in these homes, you know, we all have these partitioned homes, but I remember visiting my great grandmother's house in Ireland. She lived in this like little thatched cottage, and there were 7 kids and, you know, 2 parents, like it was one room. So I don't, you know, you could send the kids outside, right? But I don't know that, I think it compounds and fractures us even more when we add more shoulds and should nots to this space of conflict. I just had a conflict at Dubois Beach with at Soul to Soil on Thursday. I encountered a conflict with a stranger, and it was one of the best lessons ever for the kids. Like I one of the reasons why I love this program so much is not just the lessons that we have planned, but the ones that just naturally are attracted to our experience. It was my lesson. They were involved, but they got to see a highly emotionally charged scenario where I was really met with an enormous amount of resistance, completely dissolve and resolve, where the opposing force became my friend by the end of the conversation, and they witnessed that. So once you start to realize that the equation in a syntropic conflict is always going to be peace and acceptance, when you get to fully see and release this stuff, that's just automatic. That is already the outcome that is possible. You don't have to try for it. One of our problems, and this is my big problem in medicine, is we're constantly trying to control the body. We're trying to control what happens, and then we push away and avoid things, just like we avoid conflict. Oh, we really shouldn't fight in front of our kids. This isn't healthy. These are all elements of what makes conflict so difficult. So in nature, it's not that you don't see conflict. I mean, how boring would life be? Like we wouldn't even have these beautiful creations, like Shannon said, you know, the emergence of flowers and you know, butterflies. We wouldn't even have those incredible beings, but for this resistance experience. But it's not filled with drama and controversy always, right? That's a reason to watch reality TV, right? We watch like a reality TV show or a movie, and you get to see some controversy, and it's fine when it's in a movie, but it doesn't feel so good when you're living it in your real life. But the way to dissolve it, the way to show up naturally in conflict, is to completely stay within the experience that's there for you. And the other party shifts. That's how powerful your influence is. And once you start, has anyone ever experienced this? Like, is this kind of giving a yay? Anybody, like, is this feeling familiar? Yeah. So with Sarah now, right? So Sarah, I'm gonna bring in your story with the friend, right? So there's this, you know, there's beautiful opportunity for you to come to know your side, but ultimately when you're fully resolved, what's required of you but to, if you feel like having that conversation, just showing up with your perspective and seeing what she says, right? Like the inner conflict about the fact that you were judged when you were asked your opinion and then expressed it, and then she didn't like it, right? Wow, these are the characters in my field that are showing me that I have some unresolved conflict about how my perspective has changed. Maybe the people that you were once friends with who are in a totally different consciousness, there's still fear there that they're not going to understand you. But your perspective, as long as this is also just a great place to practice your perspective without any stress. Just like the how, to me, you guys, and I've said this, like I found this in my coaching experience over the years, that why, the questions why and how are some of the biggest wastes of time. That like when we, and worry is the other one. Why, how, and worry are the time wasting energies. They crowd the space. And how is something that just happens when we clear the unresolved conflicts. And it's usually the unresolved conflict in here. And then we have these conflicts, and they might not go well. They might not work out well. Like the results might not be there in the beginning, but every single time you're tested, it's awesome practice in how to show up. So even with Shannon, let me loop into this different experience. What if you could be more specific about that? What are the contexts that are the most challenging, that seem to be the hardest part of this experience? Are you catering too much to these different beings who have different needs and are coming at you? Are you maybe not energetically resolved within your own space where you're giving off this, mama is queen, mama runs the rhythm here, and everyone's needs don't get met at every second. I mean, I used to be the kind of mom, if my kids needed a sip of water, it was right there, like in the car, I'd be like contorting, like forget that it was completely unsafe to do this, but I'm like contorting myself, handing water bottles and making sure everybody is, fed, and God forbid they're hungry and I have to and to be honest, I also then had to evaluate, is it really that I feel bad that they're hungry, or that I have to listen to the fact that they're hungry for this entire walk through this fair that we went to, that I thought was going to be this cute little family experience that was going to go so well, and now I'm listening to constant whining and complaining, like, and then I don't want to feed them the food at the fair, whatever the experience is. There are all these little pieces that are underneath, that underlie what's actually expressing. But when you get to know your side, you're the fuel, you're the hydrocarbon, you're the wood. You can breathe life back into your being, into wholeness, so that you're not that flammable, that your fire can be a creative fire and not a destructive fire. And it's the same thing with illness. And this is something that is like my mission on earth to spell out, because obviously we're talking on a very general level, and any one of these scenarios we could go and just have a whole workshop of working through these steps of how do we change the consciousness, how do we remove the controversy, taking it case by case. But the consciousness is where you start, because the controversy, you just have to almost say no to engaging in the exterior battle, the battle on top. Yes, beautiful, Sarah. Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. But where you've resolved it, so you've resolved this Sarah saying that when she's feeling annoyed and worked up when her kids are demanding, and then setting her limits and expressing herself allows for freedom for them to learn those skills. So they learn, oh wow, when I ask myself, I'll tell you, most of what kids express when they're in conflict is not even their story. They don't have any idea what their story is. We did an entire segment on asking into purpose and intention, and they don't get it yet. This bears repeating. They need to get into fights. We actually haven't had that many. It's been a little bit of a bummer. I feel like we need some good fights at Soul to Soil, so we can exercise these muscles so the kids can go, what's the story behind this exterior story? And that's really where conflict gets resolved, as far as I found it. Who did I miss? How about you, Matthew? Any thoughts here? Especially because you're the fire expert.
That's funny.
King of the fire at the Foot Lodge.
That's cool. I'll take it.
You're also a fiery human being.
Yeah, I have a lot of fire.
Yeah.
No, I think everything you're saying is awesome. I love the is conflict necessary? I think conflict is beautiful. It's a gift. It's like an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to really look at what yet needs to be healed, really for yourself, because conflict really is only from within. I can see what's going on. If I don't have an inner conflict that's really charging me about what might be conflicting outside, I'll more than likely have the calm and the wisdom to approach it effectively, not from a right, wrong place, but what's going to create a resolution, like you're saying. So I think the willingness to really look at yourself honestly, I think the emotional consciousness is a really huge part of this too. Being able to recognize these unconscious emotions that happen automatically and take ownership of that, and really being willing to feel them in an honest capacity, which is what, from my experience anyway, it allows that thing that needs to be healed when we're willing to feel the grief, the pain, the sadness, the guilt, the shame, all these things that we stuff away, which cause the triggers to be re-inflamed.
Yep.
So really that willingness and capacity to be so accountable personally for these feelings and these perspectives that we're having towards a conflict. And instead of seeing it as a conflict, seeing it as an opportunity. And then what's this about for me? What do I get to look at? What do I get to really feel and dive into?
Yeah.
Where when I love what you said. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but for me, the peace really is already there. We don't have to create peace. If we're doing that work, it's automatic. Like it's waiting for us to experience and live into. But the work is for us to really be owners of what's getting in the way of that. What are the roadblocks that we've put in the way of that? And are we really willing to be responsible on that level personally?
Yeah.
And being able to be in conflict with Kristen or whoever I'm with in front of my daughter, I love that. I think that is beautiful for children to witness, even if you get messy as you get, because again, there's an opportunity. I'd much rather be authentically messy than inauthentically clean, because I'm teaching my kids to be fake and inauthentic then. No, for me, I'm just like, put all the cards on the table. Let's let it all rip, and then
you allow expression. You allow expression, because it's this unseen thing. I'm not seen. I just want to be seen. I've said it so many times, and I realize it's really being unexpressed. It's like not even seeing yourself. And without those conflicts, you're just not going to be able to do it. You can't pull it out. Like if somebody says, sit there in a meditation and pull out your deepest, darkest, most poisonous thoughts and fears. Well, good luck. Just like calling that, like a genie, you're just going to magically make it appear. You need that life to bring it out, right?
Because what you're talking about really isn't a cognitive process. We need these triggers to be triggered for us to be aware of them, to actually feel them, flow through them, work through them, clean them up. Yep. But like you said, to meditate and try to think about where are all my conflicts? Let me clean them up right now.
Right.
Like that. We've been trying to do that for far too long.
Totally. And for Magda, just by way of a little functional answer to your question, beautiful question, like how would the lens of Syntropy help us to resolve some of these examples? So for you have a challenging one, but it's such a beautiful opportunity, because this is with a 3-year-old. You're not going to rationalize this. It's not going to be a peace talk the way that it would be with an adult or even an older child who has the ability to reason and rationalize there. For you, Magda, it's beautiful for you to notice, oh, I noticed, this is what I'm thinking. And the hack that I will mention that some of you guys may already use, but is my hack for illness. It's my hack. I'm not even like a big hack person or a biohack person or any of that. And it's cool, but it's just not usually my thing. But for conflict, the hack is to remove the pressure of time. And one of the things that would be a whole other discussion that I'd love to include you guys in on is this culture of like no space. Like we don't have space for this. So really resolving conflict is secondary to how do I rework my life to actually give myself some room to heal? Because healing essentially is bringing yourself to wholeness. It's repairing those broken bonds, being a whole, being, and not just being this reactive pieces of hydrocarbon, the separateness, right? The incendiary material. Filling in that wholeness takes a little time. So you don't have to do all of this in one, but what I would start, with is whatever is I journal, but I just use the notes on my phone because it's just with me all the time, unfortunately. And that's where I do it. But sometimes you need to do that, or sometimes you just track. I notice. So one of the biggest thing is I notice this is happening. And I'll just tell you the quick story, because Magda, you just said you hadn't heard it. Maybe you guys haven't heard this story that happened at the beach the other day. So a gentleman just kind of pierced a moment where the kids were playing. They were on a tree, of course, because it's soil to soil. So why wouldn't the kids be up in a tree? And it was the older kids. And they were having so much fun together. They were supposed to be tuning their ukuleles, but Lauren and I were like, oh my gosh, they're having the best time. And we were standing right there and we were talking actually ironically about flow of the day and organizing time. And out of nowhere, this guy from the beach, this older man, just comes screaming at us, asking if we have a license and flailing his phone. I'm calling the cops. You have no right to do this. This is illegal, just all this stuff. So here I am in my quantum way of relating, just feeling immediately like resisting this because he was slinging accusations. And then I wanted to sling some back because they were unfounded. Or so I thought. But I did this where I let the emotions be there, which, by the way, because I've kind of been through this and had resolved a lot, there wasn't a whole lot for me there. But the magnetic thoughts, the thoughts of how to argue the point and meet him in this argument to be right, I let those float away. I saw them, and what I saw with them was this whole playing out of circumstances where the police officers came and we had to go into this entire thing and the whole day unravels and all of that. I saw that as a possibility and I went, no thanks. That's not the outcome I'm going for. I said, there is peace. This is a loving individual who is as connected to source and perhaps maybe crowded with some more unresolved conflicts than I at this moment, but let me speak to whatever is he's sharing and expressing. And there was a detail that he expressed that he was having a difficult time with the noise. And he said it, I can't remember, he just threw it in there. Most of it was flailing and threatening to call the police on me, but he had said something about the noise. And I heard that, and I heard his struggle. I heard that he was really having a hard time, that he was at the beach and looking at this peaceful view and watching a movie on his phone, actually, but the kids were noisy. And then they were on a tree. So I went over as he was dialing for the police. And I just said, I just met him at his pain point. And I just expressed my compassion for whatever he was going through. And I acknowledged it. I allowed him to express more and actually invited. That was the biggest thing. I invited his expression because he was so emotional that I knew that had to be let out. So as I invited his expression of, they can get hurt, how do you let them climb trees? Then I said to him, well, did you climb trees when you were a kid, sir? Of course I did, screaming. Of course I did. Well, they should climb trees. You're right. That's actually, and it was just so funny because it was like just asking him about him and asking about how he was feeling and then acknowledging his feelings and being able to be that piece myself. Now, by the way, this is not like how every conflict goes for me. I have my own settings that are much more incendiary, where I have not fixed a lot of these bonds. I haven't repaired a lot of these bonds, but this was one where I was willing, I could see him. I could see what needed to express. And all I did was let him let it out. And then I fully saw him. I let him know that I could see it. There was no admission of guilt. There was no even like any, there was no shame. There was no, this should have gone this way. I expressed myself. And then eventually we were just talking as friends. It was like, he's a parent, he gets it. Okay. And we were talking about how it is with kids, how you don't want them to, you don't want to be fearful, but at the same time, you want them to be safe. And we just had this whole discussion where we just met each other from a heart level. And it was just having the ability to not engage with the charges that were not aligned with the highest outcome that I wanted from that scenario, which was just to peacefully resolve, let the man get back to his, watching a movie while he was looking at the beach, and then getting back to being with the students. But what was so amazing was, and it was so perfect that it was the preteens, that the preteens are seeing this and they're feeling this. And, Miss Lauren is supporting them with remedies, some of them, because it was so shocking. He was so angry. So as they got to see this and as they got to see it resolve, it was a peace talk. Like, I'm going to repeat this over and over and over, that this, like, when they say, I don't feel like having a peace talk right now, this is the missed opportunity. Like, you end up being friends with somebody who's ready to like send you in handcuffs. So that was like, I think meant to be obviously the Thursday before we were already having this conversation about conflict. But whatever the scenarios are, like even Jillian, and I know you know this, right? You get to be with how this attorney makes you feel. Do you have this, like, I tried to be, show up the best way I could. And then, but no matter what, this guy still is criticizing and attacking me. Right? Like, what does that show you? What is alive for you in the story of what you're noticing in that scenario? Without it, like, I don't know about you, Jillian, but like for me, a big conflict is never being criticized. Like, I was so self-critical on purpose so that I wouldn't be criticized, because when I was little, there were probably some scenarios where I felt so horrible being criticized that I was like, well, let me just be perfect and then I'll never have to experience that again. Which, like, guess how well that works. Living a life of never being criticized. So these are all examples of conflict, but ultimately it's about you. It's always about you. The number one rule at Soul to Soil is speak from a place of yourself. When they're in a peace talk, they first start so-and-so did this, and this one, his stick hit me, and right, they're talking about them, and we have to, the first step is just to get them talking about themselves, speaking from a place of I felt hit by the stick that was in so-and-so's hand. And that seems silly, but it discharges a lot of the emotion. And then sometimes they're just not ready to talk. So it's just, okay, let's go breathe and allow that space and time. So it's not the short answer, but oh, beautiful, Lauren. This morning we had just spoken about being creators of our lives and how no one ever does anything on purpose to cause harm, and that only love is true. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful that Lucas remembered that. So we did talk about that, and Kristen, you so beautifully say this at the water ceremonies, that you can't simultaneously be a victim of a circumstance and a creator. So the best news about life and this quantum way that we're evaluating it is that we are absolutely in command of the creation in our lives. We're not in control of the stories and how things play out, because those things are happening with good reason. If we're to believe in Syntropy, which the main tenet that you'll hear me repeat over and over and over, and is by far the most helpful point when I'm in a conflict, is everything performs a function with purpose. So in Syntropy, if this situation is meant for me, all I need to do is expand my awareness as much as possible to hear whatever is coming into view, and to feel grateful for it, but also to offer myself compassion, let myself mess up, like Matthew said, let it be messy. Sometimes you have to just go through the messy phase a bunch of times, right? But there's so much shame if we scream at our kids, or we just overreact. But that too is there to show us something. So if it weren't, well, then we're not paying attention. Does anyone have any thoughts to share? Anything going on? Any unresolved conflicts? Oh, Angel, yay.
I have a silly example that I relate to Syntropy. So my husband and my son, Mac, they like to game, and I'm not a big video gamer, but I do like Tetris. So I'm sure you guys have heard of Tetris, where you have to clear the lines and you get different blocks coming down and you've got to clear the lines. Well, I am really, really good at Tetris. So even there's a new Tetris out, I beat the whole game. I'm really, really good at Tetris. But the reason I'm good at Tetris is because I believe the game wants me to win. I believe, even when I'm waiting for that straight one, they're going to give it to me because they want me to win. I just have to get through the other shapes. I got to get through those, but the game wants me to win. So I just have to stick with it. And that thought process has helped me be really good at it. And so I think about how that relates to life, right? Life wants me to win, right? Everything is getting thrown at me. The same with Syntropy, as your definition. Nothing is random, even chaos is organized, right? Life moves towards abundance. And it's such a silly example, but it really was an aha for me to just relate it to that, right? I am good at Tetris, but I believe I'm good at it because I believe the game wants me to win, and it's going to give me the pieces I need. And sometimes I suck at it and sometimes I get better, but I know they're going to give me what I need to win. And so it's a silly example, but it relates in my eyes.
It totally relates. It totally relates. And you're not going to avoid those pieces in between. You're not just going to wait for the perfect piece. That's where you're going to have a, game over, right? But that whole dealing with what's coming, with faith, that the highest outcome is right there. It's already done. It's it's so beautiful. I love that example. And now we all have something simple to picture.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be playing Tetris.
There you go.
Your electrical thoughts that don't serve are those pieces that don't fit yet, or just need to be rearranged to fit.
Yeah.
I love it, Angel. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? All right, so I don't mean for these to go too long. Not every one of these is gonna go as long as we have, but this is food for thought for next time, because the next few conversations are gonna build on one another. We are gonna talk about avoidance again. And we are going to talk about especially judgments and guilt. So over the next few weeks or days, let this kind of sink in. Everything performs a function with purpose is the one that really helps me. But I love it that life wants you to win. That's another really awesome one. Just these simple memes are very helpful, just as like affirmations. But at the same time, like, let the mess come, like, let things be messy. How like, I always think of the tidy up method with that sweet woman Joy, I think is her name, and she like, you pile every single thing from your closet into one big heap in the middle of the room, and you literally like sort through one by one. That is, I'm going to tell you, like, with your beliefs and your thoughts, it's so important. You've got to look at them and go, does this spark joy? If I believe I'm under attack and that people suck, and just, Gary and I did this exercise real quick. I'll share this last story, that we did this exercise one time in a class where this guy was teaching about triggers, and he had like a Publix bag of objects, and he was going to bring out the object, and we were going to see all the different perspectives. I did this actually at the Soul to Soil original presentation too. And before he even got an object out of the bag to see all the different relationships and perspectives on this particular object, this guy starts going off about Publix, and because the bag that was holding it was like a Publix bag. And he just was like raging about his relationship with Publix, and he's learning about triggers and how to kind of, separate them and diffuse the emotion, but he couldn't even get past the stories. That's usually what it is. There's some kind of a story that's blocking you, that you're being asked to rearrange so that it fits and make space for that perfect piece that none of those other spaces will be able to, or pieces will be able to fill in to complete the Tetris game. So yeah, so that I want you to think about. And then I want to discuss judgments and guilt and shame, because I think that the next way to cleanse out the consciousness is to also allow some of these judgments to come through, because if we don't see them, then we don't get to go, does this spark joy? And then either send it to the garbage pile or the donate or keep it, right?
Just say one other really quick thing in addition to what you were saying. I promise really quick. The other thing that hit me when in relationship to this Law for Mankind course that we took, and also what you were saying about everything performs function with purpose, that when we get into these conflicts, one thing that really rings true, I think, is that we also draw to us what we need. Like if these situations aren't just random, or that they aren't just, yes, they're performing a function and purpose, but they aren't even exterior things that they're actually situations that we have drawn to ourselves. And that has been really extremely helpful when I think, okay, why did I draw this to myself? What am I supposed to be learning right now? And I find that actually very empowering, because then it's not like the world is doing something to me, even if it's syntropic, even if it's performing a function with purpose, but actually that I am actively drawing this situation to myself, because I am on some level trying to force myself to look at something and learn something.
And as an extension of that, when you say, well, like, why is this being invited to me, right? There's that, if we could even shapeshift a little bit to like, what are the qualities that I'm expressing right now, or that I have, that I hold, that are attracting this to me? Because when it comes to illness, when it comes to, I was talking to Christina about weeds, or, any problems, we define these as problems, and we go into conflict with these things that are built into our beliefs. But actually, all of these things are invited. Experiences are invited, not necessarily, germs. If you look in nature, germs serve a function with purpose. There is not one shred of evidence that germs are the reason for a disease. But people will say, what do I do when I'm in an infection? Because there's this way of relating to infection, and it's wired to these things called germs. And we haven't separated this fear of, oh my God, infection means I could die, or I could degenerate, I could lose a part of myself, or all of those fear stories. So that you have the magnetism of fear, and then you have this story about germs that, if you guys, and I'm happy to do a whole talk on this, but this is kind of my work in what I teach in healing, and I have some videos on this. There's never been proof. The concept of a germ causes disease. The conflict with germs is entirely a story. It's a human invention. It doesn't have any scientific support. My background is in public health, and it always baffles me that my colleagues would actually come into conflict with this perspective. But the concept of a sick person makes a well person sick. A sick person passes an illness to a well person. Believe it or not, this is the craziest thing that it's been tested, and it's never been successfully shown. It's never been successfully scientifically demonstrated. We can observe it. We can go, man, there's this bug that's been going around because so-and-so that I heard about has it, and I think I have similar symptoms, and then I got it, and then my kid got it, and we see this succession. But again, that's a story. There are that is a Tetris piece, right? That is actually just needs to be moved around in order to fit, because it has never fit. It's never fit the whole picture. It's never been scientifically proven. So yeah, that could be a whole topic in itself, but there are these invited conflicts that then we get to see the stories that are there, and we get to separate the fear from your body has mechanisms to heal those things, just like you have the how of how to heal and resolve a conflict, an argument with somebody, anything, whether it's a stranger or your own family. Your body has ways of resolving these illness experiences, and there's nuance in it. There's education that you can pull in. I'm not saying you don't bring in, tools, but the how is within you. It just has to be allowed by resolving the stories that don't match a peaceful awareness, or this awareness that my body wants to win, life wants to win, wants me to win. All right. Did we cover it all? I think we did. Thank you for hanging in, you guys. This was such an amazing showing. I love that you showed up. Thank you for being here. If you have any residual questions, I hope to hear from you. And I'll see you guys next month we'll do guilt and judgment. But I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Marissa.
Oh, you're so welcome. You are so welcome.
End your meeting.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, you guys.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Take care.